we're going to begin with the most pressing story here. That, of course, being the aid finally being allowed into Gaza. Now, spoiler alert, the United States and Israel are making this unnecessarily tricky. The UN is basically like, "Hey, what the fuck are you guys doing? This foundation does not have the means to ensure that everybody receives the aid that they need." Let's remind you how the entirety of the Palestinian population is on the verge of famine. There has been a blockade conducted by Israel for the last 75 days or so. 14,000 children are on the brink of starvation, or were on the brink of starvation before aid was allowed to flow in. There were already about 5 or 6 dozen children or so. The last I saw was 57 who had already died from starvation. There is a legitimate humanitarian crisis unfolding in Gaza. And the ways in which the United States and Israel are going about it do not meet the severity of the situation. As we know, Israel nor the United States has no interest in actually bringing an end to this genocide. That much is clear. Israel and the US are the only allies that each other has at this point. The UK, Canada, France, they are finally turning on Israel. They are finally withdrawing their support and considering sanctions on this fascist rogue ethno state. Still, however, the genocide persists. As much of a tremendous step forward that this is, we should never have reached this point. Israel should not have been imposing collective punishment on the Palestinian population for these last 19 months. They should not have subjected children and innocent people to such horrific living conditions, not allowing them food, water, medical supplies, infrastructure to be rebuilt. They have consistently been assassinating doctors. There was actually an entire family of a doctor in Gaza who were killed by the IDF, bombed, burned alive. 9 of them, I'm pretty sure it was 9 of them, were killed just for the fact that they are Palestinian. For any aid distribution program to work, I'm going to say this very clearly before we get into the article. Israel nor the United States can be involved. There needs to be some sort of coalition formed amongst the other geopolitical powers all over the world that say you guys are not allowed to have any input on this because of how you have conducted yourselves up until this point. So this article is courtesy of the BBC. Controversial U.S.-backed group says it has begun aid distribution in Gaza. A controversial new aid organization backed by the U.S. and Israel has begun working in Gaza. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation said lorry loads of food has been delivered to secure sites on Monday, and that distribution had begun. What the fuck does that mean, dude? Okay, so what is British English? For anyone who speaks the appropriate and the proper version of English, just say truckloads. Like, what the fuck? A lorry is a truck. Just say that. God damn. Hundreds of Palestinians collected food parcels from a site in southern city of Rafah on Tuesday. The GHF, which uses armed American security contractors, aims to bypass the UN as the main supplier of aid to the 2.1 million people in Gaza, where experts have warned of a looming famine over an 11-week Israeli blockade that was recently eased. The UN spokesperson said the operation was a, quote, distraction from what is actually needed, and urged Israel to reopen all crossings. This has been part of the Israeli playbook since the beginning of their genocide. Not only are they indiscriminately bombing and leveling cities and assassinating, slaughtering the innocent people who live in Gaza, but they effectively only allow aid through certain ports of entry that are that they approve of. There are military checkpoints. Israel wants as little aid to get into Gaza as possible. We have seen them blatantly and repeatedly defy the appropriate aid, not allow the appropriate amount of aid to go into Gaza. This happened under the Biden administration, and once Joe Biden caught wind of the severe lack of aid entering Gaza, he didn't sanction Israel. He didn't condemn their actions. He turned around and gave them $8 billion more dollars. As I've said repeatedly, Israel acts like this not only for ideological reasons, but because they've been allowed to behave like this, and they have been emboldened in their genocide of the Palestinian people. The United States can end this with one phone call in which the president says, you are going to stop this genocide, or we are going to withdraw all arms and all funding from you. Without the funding, without U.S. taxpayer dollars, Israel is not able to carry out these operations. The UN and many aid groups have refused to cooperate with GHF's plans, which they say contradict humanitarian principles and appear to weaponize aid. They have warned that the system will practically exclude those with mobility issues, force further displacement, expose thousands of people to harm, make aid conditional on political and military aims, and set an unacceptable precedent for aid delivery around the world. Israel says an alternative to the current aid system is needed to stop Hamas stealing aid, which the group denies doing. I've seen this line in particular getting significantly more play over the last couple of weeks, only because Israel's been saying this for the length of their genocide. But as the aid discussions have come to a forefront, Benjamin Netanyahu and those in his cabinet have said that we can't disperse aid, or we have to do it this way because Hamas is stealing aid. That is not true. And even if it was true, Hamas is made up of Palestinians. Hamas is comprised of people who deserve this kind of aid. Hamas is not a foreign group of mercenaries brought in from outside of the region. They are Palestinian residents who are only part of Hamas because Israel has terrorized their family and ruined their lives. In a statement sent to journalists on Monday, GHF announced that it had, quote, commenced operations in Gaza and delivered truckloads of food to its secure distribution sites where distribution to the Gazan people began. More trucks with aid will be delivered on Tuesday, with the flow of aid increasing each day. Handout photos showed 3 lorries laden with pallets of supplies at an unspecified location and just over a dozen men carrying away boxes. The BBC has asked the GHF how many truckloads of aid got in and how many people were able to pick up aid, but it has yet to receive a response. And I'm sure that is entirely premeditated. I'm sure that is going according to plan, because if the press had an actual number to attach to this aid, the criticism of these efforts would be far larger and far more vehement, because I am certain that the appropriate amount of aid is not being let in. I have observed this genocide over the last 19 months, and if you have also observed what has gone on, you should be very skeptical of the United States. You should be very skeptical of United States foreign policy in general. It is entirely transactional, and not only is it transactional, because I understand that governments and nations do not act altruistically, it is almost entirely one-sided in that transaction. The GHF is being intentionally vague because it is a U.S.-backed organization, and its CEO, Jake Wood, recently resigned. He is also an American, ex-military, by the way. They are being purposefully vague in regards to this situation. On Tuesday, the Israeli military said in a statement that 2 distribution sites located in the Tal al-Sultan neighborhood of Rafah and the Marag corridor, which separates the city from the rest of Gaza, had begun operating and distributing food to thousands of families. Hundreds of Palestinians were seen queuing at the site in Tal al-Sultan, where food parcels were handed out by Palestinian workers. We stood We stood in a long queue. We did not deal with the Israeli army or any American staff, one recipient told a local journalist. I believe that to be the appropriate way to go about this. Take the contentious and evil forces away from the civilians. There is already trauma there is already trauma that the Palestinian population has to live with, as you know, they exist in an apartheid state where the IDF is this omnipresent force that just looms over them every possible minute. Tell them to get the fuck out. Tell the United States to get the fuck out, so that way these people do not have to worry about being a fucking shot just for looking at an IDF soldier. A Palestinian working with one of the local companies involved in the operation told the BBC that, quote, dozens of Palestinian workers from 3 Palestinian companies are overseeing the distribution process, which runs from 9 a.m. to 1900 hours. I also don't know what the fuck military time is. What is that, 7 o'clock? Runs from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. The employee, who requested anonymity as he was not authorized to speak to the media, added, quote, the distribution is coordinated with 5 American security personnel who are present on site, but there are no Israelis involved in the process. But many Palestinians stayed away from the sites. A displaced woman from the neighboring city of Khan Yunis expressed concern about having to cross Israeli military lines to collect aid from the GHF sites. Quote, we have no idea what awaits us there, whether we will return or be lost forever. We are being forced to risk our lives just to feed our children, she told BBC Arabic's Middle East Daily Radio program. One of the conditions of the most recent ceasefire was that Israel withdraw their military from Palestinian lands, whether that be in the West Bank, whether that be in Rafah, Gaza, wherever the IDF was, they had to remove themselves. Benjamin Netanyahu looked at that condition and said that is too extreme. We will not be abiding by it, and then proceeded to break the ceasefire, to violate the ceasefire. The Palestinians are understandably frightened about having to come in contact with the IDF. And it's understandable because for the last fucking 19 months, the IDF has slaughtered them simply for existing. And even if they haven't slaughtered them, they have shot them in their fucking kneecaps or blown off their fucking limbs just for merely existing. A man who was living in Khan Yunis despite an Israeli evacuation order said he would, quote, refuse to accept American aid under these terms, and warned that it marked the beginning of a broader strategy of displacement. When asked to comment on the GHF's work by reporters in Geneva, a spokesperson for the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, Jens Lark, said, we do not participate in this modality for the reasons that we have given. It is a distraction from what is actually needed, which is the reopening of all of the crossings into Gaza, a secure environment within Gaza, and faster facilitation of permissions and final approvals of all the emergency supplies that we have just outside the border, he added. Under the GHF's mechanism, Palestinians must collect boxes containing food and basic hygiene items for their families from 4 distribution sites in southern and central Gaza. The sites will be secured by American contractors, with Israeli troops patrolling the perimeters. To access them, Palestinians were expected to have to undergo identity checks and screening for involvement with Hamas. This is so fucking inhumane and despicable. How, at this point, is there anybody who looks at what Israel is doing and does not see it for what it is? Like, this is genocidal actions being conducted by an apartheid government. Screening for their involvement in a designated terror group just to receive aid is fucking insane. Even if these people are Hamas, they are still residents of Gaza. They still live within Palestinian territory. They are entitled to this aid just as much as any other innocent civilian. If we want to even reverse engineer in Hamas enrollment, it is entirely the fault of Israel and the IDF for choosing to destroy the lives of these people, not just mentally and psychologically, but physically and emotionally as well. You have the stress of living under constant surveillance, of being subjected to checks at military checkpoints just to maneuver around your own fucking city. Your civil rights and your liberties are stripped from you just for being Palestinian. Not only that, you've probably had family members killed by Israel. Your house has probably been bombed by Israel. It doesn't matter if these people are Hamas, because Hamas is an entity that formed as a result of Israel's actions within the region. UN and other aid agencies have insisted that they will not cooperate with any scheme that fails to respect fundamental humanitarian principles. Jan Egeland, Secretary General of the Norwegian Refugee Council and a former UN humanitarian chief, has described the GHF as militarized, privatized, and politicized. The people behind it are military, ex-CIA, ex-security people. There is a security firm that is going to work closely with one party to the armed conflict, the Israeli Defense Force. He told the BBC on Monday. They will have some hubs where people will be screened according to the needs of one side in the conflict. Israel. We cannot have a party to the conflict. We cannot have a party to the conflict decide where, how, and who will get aid, he added. That seems like the most basic fucking concept ever, is that when you're dealing with a conflict like this, when you are dealing with a rogue nation in Israel and its fucking chief dick rider, the United States, you need an unbiased third party to go in, or an unaffiliated third party to go in. You need an organization not comprised of former military like Jake Wood. You need an organization that has a team of doctors and humanitarian and people specifically trained to deal with these kinds of crises. You need crisis mitigation. This is the same as having a fucking police officer go check up on someone who is having a mental health episode. They are not going to do anything productive. They are not trained on de-escalation. They are not trained in this specific avenue. All they know is violence, and all they understand is the perpetuation of violence. They have no interest in solving this problem. They only have an interest in doing PR so that Israel can maybe see some favorability gains, because people are waking up to the catastrophe that we are experiencing. Every fucking day now, you wake up and you see liberal outlets talking about the atrocities that are being committed by Israel. You wake up and see NBC posting pictures of dead fucking children that have died by way of Israel. They didn't, like, those children did not just perish. No, they were killed by Israel. On Sunday night, Jake Wood resigned as the GHF's executive director, saying the group's aid distribution system could not work in a way that would be able to fulfill the principles of humanity, neutrality, impartiality, and independence. Fuck this guy, by the way. This guy's a bum. Jake Wood, you're a fucking loser. Like, how... What is so hard about distributing this aid in the appropriate manner? I mean, when you're aligned with Israel, that's entirely the problem, is because you don't want to distribute this aid. You would just rather the violence and the carnage continue. The GHF's board rejected the criticism, accusing, quote, those who benefit from the status quo of being more focused on, quote, tearing this apart than on getting aid in. It said the system was fully consistent with humanitarian principles and would feed a million Palestinians, just under half of the population, by the end of the week. Well, guess what, pal? That's not fucking good enough. It should be 100% of the population by, like, fucking yesterday. Because, hello, they are at the end of a 75 fucking day blockade. Like, if you cared so much about distributing this aid and you cared so much about being a force for good, why would you have not worked harder to get this aid into the country? Like, I don't understand. I don't understand the mental gymnastics that these people do to be able to absolve themselves of their complicity in all of this. This is an unserious organization. This is not someone who I trust in being able to deal with a humanitarian crisis. I wouldn't trust them to fucking disperse food at a fucking farmer's market. John Acri, a former senior manager at USAID, the U.S. government agency responsible for administering foreign aid, has been named interim executive director. Hamas has warned Palestinians not to cooperate with GHF systems, saying it would replace order with chaos, enforce a policy of engineered starvation of Palestinian civilians, and use food as a weapon during wartime. GHF statement alleged that Hamas has also made death threats targeting aid groups supporting humanitarian operations at GHF's safe distribution sites and efforts to block the Gazan people from accessing aid at their sites. Who has killed more aid workers, Israel or Hamas? If you guessed Israel, you would be correct. Who has killed more people from the World Kitchen, Israel or Hamas? Who has killed more doctors, Israel or Hamas? If you answered Hamas to any of these questions, you are fucking wrong. Hamas is not the terrorist actor in this instance. It is Israel. This is pure projection. Pure projection. Israel's assault on aid extends far beyond what they've just done over these last 2.5 months. It is 19 months worth of unmitigated savagery in which innocent people not affiliated with Hamas or even Palestinian civilians have been killed just for merely, again, existing. There are countless stories of the IDF shooting at ambulances or at aid trucks. I don't want to hear it, man. I don't want to hear this fucking bullshit any longer. Israel imposed a total blockade on humanitarian aid to Gaza on March 2nd and resumed its military offensive 2 weeks later, ending a 2-month ceasefire. It said the steps were meant to put pressure on the armed group to release the 58 hostages still held in Gaza, up to 23 of whom are believed to be alive. The deceased hostages are dead because of, once again, the actions of Israel, whether intentionally, like they killed them intentionally, or unintentionally by doing things like not allowing aid into the country, not allowing food into the country. It's also worth mentioning, like, all of these these outlets always do this. They always mention the Israeli hostages who were taken captive, but never about the Palestinian civilians who were also taken captive by Israel, a number which eclipses 1,000. The hostages, Benjamin Netanyahu does not give a singular fuck about the hostages. It's never been about the hostages. The hostages are merely a political pawn for him to use in order to perpetuate this genocide. If he keeps violating the ceasefire and lying about Hamas not wanting to do a prisoner swap, he can continue this assault. As soon as the hostages are freed and wartime ends, Israel goes to special elections. Benjamin Netanyahu is removed from government and hopefully sent to fucking prison where he rots for the rest of his miserable life. He does not want that outcome, which is why he will continue this genocide until he is either arrested or he fully ethnically cleanses the Palestinian people. On May 19th, the Israeli military launched an expanded offensive that Prime Minister Netanyahu said would see troops, quote, take control of all areas of Gaza. The plan reportedly includes completely clearing the north of civilians and forcibly displacing them to the south. Netanyahu also said Israel would temporarily ease the blockade and allow a basic amount of food into Gaza to prevent a famine, following pressure from allies in the U.S. Since then, Israeli authorities say they have allowed at least 665 truckloads of humanitarian aid, including including flour, baby food, and medical supplies, into Gaza. However, the head of the UN's World Food Program warned on Sunday that the aid was only a drop in the bucket of what was needed in the territory to reverse the catastrophic levels of hunger amid significant shortages of basic food and skyrocketing prices. They literally just said, like 5 paragraphs up, that these organizations will only be able to feed 50% of the population by the end of the week. And that 50% is on the higher end. It's not enough. It's not enough. It should be 100%. But it won't be 100% because that would require Benjamin Netanyahu to pull back on doing shit like this. It would force him to reopen all entries into Gaza. And he, again, has no interest in doing that. 500,000 people face starvation in the coming months, according to an assessment by the UN-backed Integrity Food Security Phase Classification. This includes 14,000 children. The BBC did not include that, but I am. Israel launched a military campaign in Gaza in response to Hamas's cross-border attack on October 7th, which killed about 1,200 people and led to 250 being taken hostage. At least 54,056 people have been killed in Gaza since then, including 3,900 over the past 10 weeks. Put those two numbers side by side. If you're in NBA Twitter, you'll see this a lot. It's like you have player A who posts these numbers. Player B who posts these numbers. We're going to do this, but with terrorism. If Group A killed 1,200 people and Group B killed 54,000 people, who would you say is the terrorist actor? The only answer is Israel.